A couple years ago, I made a video about the Epcot World Showcase Adventures, charming attractions where you'd defeat a series of villains by completing tasks throughout the different lands of the park, while the story is presented to you through a screen. What I didn't talk about at the time was an attraction in the Magic Kingdom with pretty much the same exact description. Sorcerers of the Magic Kingdom opened in 2012, about 3 years after the World Showcase adventure, and had a much less complicated life, going virtually unchanged until its unceremonious closing in 2021 amidst the pandemic. So this attraction didn't even last a full decade. But, much like Epcot's version, I was all over this thing when it was active. I completed the entire story and even managed to keep my old map and different collectible cards. I'll explain those in a bit for the uninitiated. All that said, I've always felt that Sorcerers made way less sense than the WSA. Why would you spend time on this cute but unimpressive little adventure when Magic Kingdom has by far the most attractions out of the 4 parks in Disney World? It's a genuine challenge to ride everything in a single day. Well, at least it is now. Sorcerers just barely predates the new Fantasyland expansion that really pushed those numbers over the edge. So maybe Sorcerers opened as a bit of a holdover? Something to do in the park that'll turn your eyes away from the massive construction going on? But no, that'd be ridiculous. It was a ton of work just to get this thing running. Designing cards, outfitting the park with portals, wrangling the voice actors, stationing cast members. This was an attraction intended to last at least as long as the WSA. So what happened? Well, that's what I'd like to find out. Come with me as we dissect Sorcerers of the Magic Kingdom, talk about its quirks, and hopefully along the way figure out why it's no longer with us. So I gave a brief description earlier, but what exactly is Sorcerers of the Magic Kingdom? I've been calling it an attraction, but it's more like a game. When you sign up at the Main Street Fire Station, you'll be given cards, a map, and a message from Merlin through a portal. He'll let you know that Hades has recruited dastardly villains to steal the pieces of the Crystal of the Magic Kingdom. It's your job to follow the map markers and interact with different portals across the land to intercept these villains and foil Hades' plot. The portals are these well-concealed screens built into the decor of the park. Since the game's closing, a lot of these spots have been covered up, but not all of them. So, for fun, I went to the Magic Kingdom, pulled out my map from over a decade ago, went to each portal spot to see what was still there, and took pictures. The clearest ones I got were definitely from Fantasyland. You can explicitly see the portal shape in this stained glass window. There's an obvious portal spot here where you can even still see the sensors that were meant to detect your cards. And this portal was hilariously just covered up by a shield. I wasn't nearly as lucky in the other lands, but I did notice what looked like a screen background in this Main Street spot, suggesting that there's a screen there. I visited the fire station and noticed these Dalmatian models for the first time, which has nothing to do with the scavenger hunt, but I thought it was neat. This train station sign definitely used to be a portal. I also had a weird interaction here as I waited for an angry dad and his crying children to get out of the way. This happened twice while I was doing this. I guess that's what happens when your picture spots are all the odd nooks and crannies of the park. You find the family meltdowns desperate to be out of view. Anyway, this Adventureland display has another sensor in it. There's a very obvious old portal spot right next to it. This covered up spot bleeds into the Pirates of the Caribbean line, and there used to be a fireplace in Tortuga Tavern with a portal, but the whole fixture seems to have been thrown out. These shelves match up with the map though. I couldn't find much of anything in Liberty Square or Frontierland, partially due to the major construction going on blocking the path to at least one of the portal spots, but it was fun to explore the park in this random way. Anyway, that brings us to the actual story of the game. Once Merlin sends you on your way, you'll be tracking down 9 different villains in order to repair the Crystal of the Magic Kingdom. These villains are Cruella de Vil on Main Street, Jafar, Scar, and Yzma in Adventureland, Governor Ratcliffe and Dr. Facilier in Liberty Square/Frontierland, Maleficent and Ursula in Fantasyland, and the final showdown with Hades, also in Fantasyland. Weird that they bothered outfitting Main Street with portals and only stuck one villain there, but whatever. It's certainly an interesting set. A lot of the Disney villain mainstays are here, but there are a couple oddballs thrown in, namely Yzma and Ratcliffe. I personally love that there was random Emperor's New Groove representation in this game, even if the whole thing is thrown off by Kuzco and Yzma very obviously not being voiced by David Spade and Eartha Kitt. Patrick Warburton did come back for Kronk though, so we know he does it for the love of the game. The rest of the voice cast is pretty solid. A lot of the biggest names are obviously missing, like Robin Williams and Jeremy Irons, but Keith David showed up for Facilier, which is crazy to me. So why the hell is the Pocahontas villain here? Watching these bits just makes me even more uncomfortable with this entire movie existing. The way they frame searching for the crystal as returning to the new world to dig up a greater treasure, it's just kinda tactless. You could have easily stuck a Captain Hook, Queen of Hearts, or Gaston into this slot and it would have been far more natural. Anyway, each chapter plays out pretty similarly. Merlin will direct you to a character from the movie to explain what's going on, and they guide you as you steal back the crystal from the villains. I do like how whenever there's an older magical character similar to Merlin from the source material, they'll use them as your guide. So Genie, Mama Odie, Rafiki, and Merryweather all get a spotlight. When that's not an option, they just run with the protagonist. So Pocahontas, Pongo, who Merlin has to awkwardly narrate for, Cusco, who really just does not seem invested in anything going on, and Sebastian, who does not fit either category and is really the odd crab out. By the time you get to Hades, Merlin takes the reins. Strange how the game seems so resistant to use anything from Hercules other than its villain, plus Pain and Panic. My favorite detail across the whole thing is how Merlin reports to you from a different Disney ride every time to really ground the experience in the Magic Kingdom. Pirates of the Caribbean, the Enchanted Tiki Room, the Mad Tea Party, Jungle Cruise, the Main Street Tram, the moat around the castle, which is definitely not a ride, but this is the Little Mermaid chapter, so it's on theme. And for Liberty Square / Frontierland, they pull the riverboat and the raft to Tom Sawyer Island, both of which aren't in the park anymore. For the villains who died in their movies, Hades just offers them escape from the underworld in exchange for their help. But for the others, Hades tends to put on a disguise and grant them their greatest desire. Puppies for Cruella, a throne for Yzma, freedom for Jafar and Ratcliffe, you get the idea. Occasionally, they do something fun with each villain's own schemes. Maleficent's plan is essentially to betray Hades from the jump and take control. Ursula's plot involves drowning the entire kingdom. Scar, who really has nothing but his silver tongue to work with, attempts to trick the hyenas into believing he's invincible, only for you to mess that plan up. So Scar goes crawling to Hades for more power, and he turns him into a cloud? Yeah, they don't really know what to do with these underpowered villains. Cruella's plot revolves around a big fireworks display, so they at least get firecracker weapons built in. Ratcliffe pretty much gets nothing. Guess they didn't want actual realistic guns involved. All in all, it's a charming little story utilizing a lot of A-list Disney characters. In that way, it has a leg up on the WSA, though it's perhaps less exciting to see well-established Disney legends here than the more niche Disney Channel properties. That leaves one last real major aspect of the game to discuss. The way you confront these villains is through the collectible cards. Each card portrays a different Disney character doing some kind of attack. When prompted, you could present a card in front of a portal, triggering a matching animation, followed by the villain's defeat playing out. As far as the actual game of it is concerned, it's not terribly engaging. At least with the WSA, there would occasionally be some kind of puzzle or prompt beyond the bare minimum, with the real-life effects propping it up. Since Sorcerers is entirely contained within these screens and the only player interaction is holding up a card when the screen tells you to, it gets old fast. But the cards themselves were so cool. There are over 70 of these, a small enough number where a part of me really wants to talk through all of them, but a big enough number where doing that too meticulously will get tedious real fast. So I'm gonna try to be as efficient as possible and present every card to you through the course of a more general discussion. Every card is categorized into one of 9 spell classes: Animal, Fairy, Hero, Machine, Monster, Mystic, Princess, Toy, and Warrior. Think of these as your Pokemon types, general classifications to help organize a wide variety of cards. And just like Pokemon types, some spell classes are far more represented than others. Most obviously, machines are incredibly scarce, with only 5 cards in the initial set. Not only that, but 4 of them come from 2 Pixar properties, Cars and WALL-E. In general, Pixar representation in these cards is odd. There's a big focus on the main Walt Disney Animation Studios canon. They even make a point to have the only Mickey and Donald cards specifically reference Fantasia, The Three Caballeros, and Fun and Fancy Free. So Pixar feels purposely set to the side and only present for very specific spell classes where they kind of carry. The only non-Pixar machine card at the game's launch was Doris's bowler hat attack. Meet the Robinsons representation feels incredibly random, even in the context of 2012. But I love that it's in here, especially since this is one of very few cards themed to a villain. So, any wild guesses where the rest of the Pixar cards ended up? If you said toy, you have good instincts, but weirdly only Woody and Buzz get cards. I would have thought they'd overstuff this category with as many Toy Story characters as they could get their hands on. But no, the hard carry of the toy spell class is Winnie the Pooh. Somehow Pooh, Eeyore, and Gopher of all characters got cards. I don't even think Gopher is considered a toy in Winnie the Pooh canon, so this is a really odd pick. And no Tigger representation? Heresy. Oddly, there is one more toy card that I would have never thought of. It's Pinocchio. Okay, yeah, I guess a puppet is a toy, but it's just never how Pinocchio is really talked about in his movie. So like, sure, but weird. Well, if Toy Story didn't take over the toy class, surely Monsters, Inc. took over the monster class, right? Nope, they just got one card, Mike's Grand Entrance. The monster spell class is actually one of the most interestingly varied categories despite being one of the smaller ones. They really pulled from the furthest reaches of the Disney canon to make such a unique lineup of 6 cards. You get 2 different package film reps with the Headless Horseman's Exploding Jack-o'-lantern and the Giant's Giant Stomp. My man is named Willy, give him some respect. The Rock Titan from Hercules gets a card here, one of the rare times where they actually use his proper name of Lithos. Lithos? Lithos? Lithos. Mushu's Fiery Breath is here, which feels like it might fit better as an animal or mystic card, but those categories already have enough reps, so it's fun to give Mushu this distinction. And finally rounding out the set is Quasimodo's Bell. They gave Quasimodo the monster spell class. So, did y'all not watch the movie? Who is the monster and who is the man? The point is that Frollo's the monster and Quasimodo's the man. I really hope this categorization is just a cute nod to that line from the movie, because otherwise, you are just insulting Quasi with the very sentiment that kept him trapped in the bell tower for years. Bad look. Anyway, we've only got 4 more Pixar cards to talk about, and they all end up in the hero spell class because they're all from The Incredibles. A little on the nose there, if you ask me. Somehow, Mr. Incredible, Violet, Dash, and Frozone all got cards. Why the hell did Elastigirl get snubbed? This really overstuffs the hero category, since it already exists as a bit of a catch-all for any Disney protagonists that don't fit well into any other spell class. In fact, there were so many of these relatively generic characters that they made 2 spell classes to contain them all. Warrior and Hero might as well be interchangeable here. Hero may imply more morally righteous or larger-than-life characters, while Warrior implies more militaristic or badass anti-heroes. Flynn Rider and the Queen of Hearts, one of the other very few villain cards, certainly imply that. But it's really all the same. Looking at these groups side by side, it seems the cards were all shuffled between the 2 at random. How exactly is Mowgli or Lumiere more of a warrior than a hero? What makes Grumpy or Nibs, the famous Lost Boy, more of a hero than a warrior? Nibs got a card and Peter Pan didn't, by the way. Plenty of these can also totally work for other more niche spell classes. Why not classify Mr. Toad's Wild Ride and Maurice's Woodchopper as machine spells? Or King Trident's Trident and Aladdin's Lamp as mystic spells? Hell, Prince Naveen's Army of Frogs probably works better as an animal spell, even if that one is already overstuffed. But I think the most egregious miss here is Hercules' Tower Topple, a warrior spell. Hercules, the guy whose whole quest is about becoming a true hero, got classified as a warrior. That's honestly just a little embarrassing. Anyway, that covers all 11 Pixar cards, leaving the remaining 59 to all represent films from the proper Disney canon. So how well done is that representation? Well, they were clearly willing to pull from niche stuff like the package films, but for the most part it's what you'd expect. Only the truly big names get cards. The only Dark Age representative outside of Winnie the Pooh is Robin Hood's magic arrow, which is weird on several levels. Why is Robin Hood's arrow now magic? Every other card stays well within the bounds of its movie world. What compelled them to give Robin Hood this upgrade? Similarly, the 2000s get basically nothing aside from the most recent movies at the time, such as the previously mentioned Meet the Robinsons. Strangely, this means Emperor's New Groove has no cards in the game despite being 1/9 of the campaign, and somehow Lilo and Stitch got snubbed despite being one of Disney's biggest successes at the time. Every other major movie you can probably think of managed at least 1 card. The only other snubs I can think of are Tarzan, almost certainly for copyright reasons, and Lady and the Tramp, which is understandable. Can't really imagine what attack any of these characters would be doing. Though they came up with something for 101 Dalmatians, so maybe that's bullshit. I guess that brings us to our biggest spellclass of the bunch, Animal. This is incredibly unsurprising. There are just too many Disney movies that primarily star animals. It was bound to have the most reps. Bambi, Jungle Book, Lion King, they basically had to have cards in this category. Though at least Lion King had the good sense to have their Rafiki card classified as Mystic. I think plenty of other animal cards could have been shuffled to other classes like that. Sure, Monstro is a whale, but he's like a monster whale. It's in his name. The Woozle's Woozle Nightmare is the only Winnie the Pooh card to not be a toy, when these guys clearly have stitching on them. They're also imaginary nightmare creatures, so Monster could have worked here too. And then there's the surprise Bolt representation. I know the whole point of the movie is that Bolt isn't actually a superhero, but if his move here is gonna be his super bark, I see no reason why he can't slot in next to the Incredibles in the hero class. Alright, 3 categories left, stick with me. There aren't any big surprises in the Mystic spell class, it's all the essential magic characters including Yen Sid, Mama Odie, and the Mad Hatter. Yeah, that one's weird. Merlin gets his own card here, which is a little odd since he's usually busy during the story of the game, but I suppose it would have been weirder for him to be missing. What's more interesting is how certain major magical characters are absent from here because they need to bolster up the minuscule Fairy spell class. With only 5 representatives, Fairy stands tied with Machine for the fewest cards in the initial batch. I assume when they conceptualized this category, they rightfully thought that Disney used Fairy characters a lot, and they should all be here. But then you actually sit down and list them. You gotta have Tinkerbell, obviously. The good fairies from Sleeping Beauty get represented by Merryweather's Stone spell, which I assume is referencing this moment in the movie where they turn Diablo to stone, but the art just looks like Merryweather's hurling stones at you, which is really funny. The blue fairy from Pinocchio, which is already kind of niche. The fairy godmother from Cinderella, which makes sense, fairies in her name, though she doesn't really match the aesthetic. And at this point, assuming you're avoiding the extra Tinkerbell movies, who else do you pull? Why, the Sugar Plum Fairies from the Nutcracker Suite segment of Fantasia, of course. This is such an unhinged pick. Like, it's kinda cool, but also really speaks to how they were scraping the bottom of the barrel for fairy reps. Finally, we come to the Princess spell class, probably the most well-managed set. It's very simple. Each of the official Disney princesses of the time gets a card. For those who didn't see my Princess of Heart video, that's Snow White, Cinderella, Aurora, Ariel, Belle, Jasmine, Pocahontas, Mulan, Tiana, and Rapunzel, who just made the deadline here. There's actually a weirdly high number of Tangled cards considering how recent that movie was. A big hit gets a lot of reps, I guess. So while this group is really cool in how it so perfectly showcases the official princesses of the time, needing to come up with an attack for all these ladies makes for some funny spell names. Ah yes, Snow White's House Cleaning, Cinderella's Magic Ribbon, Ariel's Bubble Attack. Pocahontas, Tiana, and Rapunzel managed to feel effective and canonical, but somehow Belle now has the power to conjure a blizzard. Aurora's just does not seem even slightly like an attack. They somehow made 3 Sleeping Beauty cards, by the way, yet Beast didn't get his own card. I don't know what word salad they were eating when coming up with Jasmine's Magic Carpet Tassels of Fury. And then there's Mulan, who did not get the memo and brought a fucking cannon to the princess meeting. At least we know she's taking this battle seriously. They also hit her with the full name Fa Mulan. Why'd they do that? With that, we've managed at least a brief look at all 70 cards that make up the initial set of Sorcerers of the Magic Kingdom cards. However, throughout the years that the game was operational, they would release special cards for the Halloween and Christmas holiday events. These pretty much come in 3 categories: cards based on other attractions, cards representing the missing members of the Mickey Mouse crew, and cards representing the recent movies of the time. This is how Frozen and Zootopia managed to make the cut, as well as the oft-forgotten short Prep and Landing. Guess the holiday theming was the perfect storm there. I find the Mickey Mouse ones the most boring. The initial set was so insistent on keeping it within the movie canon, and these just don't bother. But this way, Goofy, Pluto, Minnie, the Duck Triplets, and Chippendale get representation. Can't believe they snubbed Daisy though. She and Clarabelle are in Minnie's card art, but that seems like poor compensation. The cards based on rides are easily the coolest, and manage to prop up some underrepresented spell classes. Haunted Mansion and Pirates of the Caribbean make for perfect new monster cards, and the Phantasmal Fireworks Flash is a fun way to squeeze in one more machine card. They were definitely running out of ideas in the later years though, and needing to theme cards around the holidays every time clearly got a bit restrictive. That's how we got the Country Bears Moonlight Jamboree and Rover's Christmas Carousel of Progress. And my 2 least favorite cards in the whole batch, the Orange Bird's Juice-a-Lanterns and the Tiki Room's 4 Cawing Birds, both of which were given the arbitrary new spell class of Flying Animal. Just why? The absolute final card to talk about is one that was exclusive to cast members. My assumption is that this was meant for cast members to use whenever a guest was having trouble with the game and needing a helping hand, or an override if the tech was being finicky. It makes for an incredibly cool and distinct collectible. Okay, that's every card. Was that worth the effort? I didn't even get to talk about the silly little rhymes written for every single one, or the dumb attack types that actually determine your card's effectiveness. Yeah, you'd think it'd be the spell classes, the obvious distinguishing feature of each card that any child would recognize, but nope. You gotta read the fine print and notice whether your card's attack is Charming, Energy, Flying, Gross, Quick, Strong, or Wishful. Every enemy encounter has a specific one of these attacks that they're weak and strong to, but this only comes into play if your game is set to a higher difficulty. I certainly never noticed these attack types as a kid because the spell classes are way cooler and could have easily made for Pokemon-esque PvP type matchups. Machine could be good against Fairy since modernity and technology take over fantasy. Monster would be strong against Machine since Godzilla's just gonna crush that car or tank that missile. A hero could conquer the greatest monster, a warrior could outskill a hero, a mystic would confound any warrior. I don't know, the pure heart of a princess is the greatest magic of all and thus beats mystic? Let's see what's left. Toy can beat princess because a princess is only as good as her merchandise. Then animal obviously beats toy, all dog owners know this. Guess that leaves fairy beating animal because of power over nature? Yeah, that tracks. But why are we even theorizing how PvP would work with a Disney trading card game? It already exists. I'm not gonna say that Lorcana killed Sorcerers of the Magic Kingdom, but I do think that Disney saw a fascination with the Sorcerers cards that they wanted to capture in a market that wasn't limited to guests in the park. In many ways, the idea of Disney trading cards feels wasted by the very nature of Sorcerers. I'm sure it still managed to make a decent chunk of cash, but Lorcana has shown how much those floodgates could have been opened. I wouldn't be surprised if Disney shut down Sorcerers, partially because they didn't want two different trading card games confusing consumers, even if one was relegated to a game within a single park. But it all really goes to show how ultimately cumbersome and odd Sorcerers of the Magic Kingdom was. In a way, it reminds me of Tom Sawyer Island and the Rivers of America. If you don't know, between Frontierland and Liberty Square, there was a river surrounding a small island. An enormous riverboat took guests around the island, and there were small rafts you could take to actually travel to the island and explore. It was wildly impractical, inconvenient, and kind of boring. The attractions amounted to a big Tom Sawyer themed playground and a long, slow boat ride, which is particularly needless since in order to travel from the parking lot to the Magic Kingdom, you already have to take a boat. Neither attracted a lot of guests, their turnover was abysmal, and because they were themed around this giant body of water, they took up a lot of space. So it makes all the sense in the world that recently they've completely uprooted the island and the river with the intention of building a Cars-themed Frontierland expansion. It's a perfectly logical decision that I can't really blame the company for making. But at the same time, there was something magical in that river. It was part of Walt's idea of travel within the Disney parks, moving pieces that make guests ask, what is that, whenever it entered their view. The ability to look out over this river, notice this island, and realize, wait, I can go there? It made the park feel more real, because real places don't naturally form to the most efficient and cost-effective shape. Sometimes there's an inconvenient river to build around. Have I visited Tom Sawyer Island in the past decade? No. When was the last time I played through the Sorcerers of the Magic Kingdom? I don't remember. Hell, the only reason I ever beat the game was because I had an annual pass as a kid, and my parents had some kind of scheduling mishap that gave me and my little brother an extra day alone in the park. So, since we had done all the rides earlier in the trip, we just committed to finishing Sorcerers. It's hard to imagine any other context where I would have wanted to complete this lengthy campaign. Extra cards were behind a paywall, the story was repetitive and predictable, and the novelty of the spells wore off fairly quickly. But despite all that, it was charming. In the years after I beat the game, I smiled whenever I noticed another guest activating one of those portals. I can imagine someone else noticing it and thinking, wait, can I do that? It made these characters feel more present within the park, and in turn made the park feel more alive. So yes, I can look at all the oddities and inconveniences of Sorcerers and logically conclude that it was probably the right call to scrap it. But there's always going to be a part of me pining for what an attraction like Sorcerers represents. One of those odd experiments that makes these parks so memorable to me. Thankfully, the spirit of Sorcerers lives on in things like the WSA and Lorcana, but I'm still going to illogically miss this odd little piece of Magic Kingdom history. Thanks for watching, and an extra special thank you to my YouTube members. Or, member. Thanks, G-Meister. If you don't know, for the low price of $1 a month, you can get your name in my videos and help support my YouTube endeavors. I don't really intend to say the names out loud going forward, because I always find it annoying when other channels do that and I just want to get to the end of the video, but G-Meister gets a bonus as the sole early adopter. Sorry this video took so long to get out. I wanted this to be my May release, but last month was just filled with personal complications that got in the way. But it's here now. Like, comment, subscribe if you so desire. See y'all next time for something completely different.